right, well, good morning. It's good to see everybody here today. Also want to say welcome to our folks who are on Facebook Live, who are dialing in. We are glad to have you as a part of this morning. Facebook Live has been a really great thing. We've had lots of connections to first-time guests who are checking us out first before showing up, which is great, or people who have to be at home because they're sick or because they're away on vacation or away on work, and that's a great way for us to connect. So that's been good. If you're here this morning and you're a first-time guest, we just want to say a special welcome to you, and we are very glad that you have chosen to give your time to be with us this morning. And if there's a way that we can serve you, please let us know. We'd be glad to do that. As Dustin said, we are beginning a new message series this morning, and we just entitled it Immeasurably More. And I'm going to talk more specifically about biblically what that means in just a minute. But, you know, when you think about more in your life, getting more coming your way, you know, I tend to think of things like unexpected things that happen when I get more. Like when I go and I take my truck and they change my oil, and then I get it back and I look on the thing and it says, oh man, they did a free rotation of my tires. I got more. Or, you know, you order your set of Ginsu knives and they send that to you, and then you open the package and you realize they threw in a free paring knife for a $19.99 value for nothing. Like, I got it. It was amazing. Like, I got more. Or just thinking about some unexpected, something that's about to happen in our life, and that makes me think of Becky and I were in Jackson Hole, Wyoming several years ago, and we had gone into Jackson, the town, and we're at a fly fishing shop, and while we were there, I just happened to pick up a book, and it was just one of these beautiful hardback books, and it had pictures of Jackson Hole and just all the scenery and everything around there. So I'm opening it up, and there's this 2-page spread that has the Grand Tetons on there, and it's just that amazing, iconic picture, and it's a picture that's taken from a particular vantage point, and there's a little barn, old barn right here, and it was really cool, and so I was kind of admiring that for just a minute. Then I went to turn the page, and I realized the page on the right was actually a double page. Something was folded in. I was like, wait a minute, what's that all about? So I flip it open, and I didn't realize I wasn't looking at the whole span of the Grand Teton. So you flip that open, and it becomes this big panoramic picture of the Grand Tetons, and it is even more beautiful and more grand when you flip that open. And then at the bottom, it had all this helpful information about things that you should see and tips about, you know, visiting Jackson Hole. And I was like, man, I'm glad I didn't miss that. You know, I'm glad I flipped that open and didn't just breeze right by it. It was nice to see that just kind of unfolded there. But as I think about that specifically, I also think about how kind of our Christian life works, and even how the church works as time goes on, that, you know, God is always unfolding something else in our life. Like, that's a part of his plan and will for our life, unfolding. It's like there's always something that he's holding out before us that has yet to be done that he needs us to do. There is more that he wants to do in our life and in this world. Again, both individually and then collectively as a church. He's always up to something, and he's always ready to unfold that next thing before us. We just have to have eyes to see it, don't we? Like, we have to be in a position to be ready that when he unfolds that we see what he's up to, and we're prepared to sort of take that step with him. And, you know, when you look throughout the history in Scripture, you see this all over the place, all the way back to Abraham. When, you know, when God connected to Abraham, it was like, Abraham, a whole new thing's about to happen with you, brother. You're gonna give birth to a son, even though you're super old and your wife's super old, but this is gonna happen. You're gonna actually become the father of many nations, and we're gonna move you to a whole new land. Like, God unfolded this whole thing before him. And Moses, you know, he finds himself standing before this burning bush, and God's speaking out of the bush, and he's like, guess what, Moses? Something big and new's about to happen to you. You're gonna go, and you're gonna lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. And you're going to lead them to this promised land. And that's like a whole new thing for him, unfolding that for you. Or Paul in the New Testament, you know, Paul was like not a good guy to begin with. He was killing Christians and wanted to stamp out Christianity. And then he's on this road to Damascus and has this encounter with God and is sort of struck down. And it's like by the end of this encounter, he's like, I totally see, God, who you are now and who Jesus is. And from that point forward, he became the greatest evangelist. He was the greatest ambassador for Christ and the greatest church planter that ever was. Planted churches that eventually went around the world. And we're here today meeting as a church because of what Paul did back then, because God came to him and he encountered him and unfolded that next part of his life, showed him something more in his life. And I guess that's what the point I'm getting to is, you know, God is all about doing that sense of more, and it's even more than we can imagine. And so the verse that really hones in on this is found in Ephesians 3:20-21. This is going to be the banner verse over this whole series, by the way. It's Paul speaking to the church at Ephesus, and he's trying to encourage them and he's trying to challenge them to stay focused on Christ and the love of Christ and be focused on the mission of the church and all these things. And so he sort of does this spiel, and then he lands with what we call a benediction, sort of wrapping the whole thing up. And here's what he says there. He says, now to him being God, who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen. So he finishes this up by saying, listen, church at Ephesus, church at Cornerstone, this God who we are following has given us this power that only comes from Christ. And because of that, through that, God can do immeasurably more than we could ever think or imagine. And that term that really you hone in on there is immeasurably. Like, what in the world does that mean? Because to us and people in our generation, we measure everything, don't we? I mean, like, it's like, how far is it from here to there? I don't know. Well, how long is it going to take me to get there? I don't know. I don't like that. Or, like you're trying to make something or bake something, and you're like, well, how much sugar am I supposed to put in this? Doesn't matter. Just throw it in. Well, how much salt? I don't know. Just kind of throw it in. Well, then what do I mix it up? How do I put it? I don't know. Have you ever tried to learn something from a mom or grandma about cooking, and they're just like, you just kind of throw this in there, and then you do this, and how long? It doesn't matter until you feel good about it, and you look at it, and it's purple and gray or whatever. Purple and gray, that would be a bad color scheme. Anyway. But you know how that goes? Like, we like to measure things and know. We like to be people who know things. So sometimes it's hard to wrap our brains and our hearts around this God who can do this thing we call immeasurably more. We cannot measure all that God can and will do through our lives. We just have to have faith and trust that he can do that if we let him. And he says immeasurably more than all we can ask. So think about the last time you asked God for something. He can do immeasurably more than that. Sometimes I wonder if our prayers are way too small because of that. Or how about more than we can imagine? So when was the last time you imagined God doing something in your life or something in this world? It's like he can do immeasurably more than that. Whatever our thinking is, that whatever ideas we come up with, whatever the prayers we offer, whatever that list is for us, God's like, man, I could do so much more than that. I am capable of that. And really, I guess it comes down to us, doesn't it, as individuals? Are we open to God doing more? Or do we kind of close in and say, yeah, just do this much, would you please? Just get me that parking place this morning. I'd really just like the parking place. Just can I get a raise? Can I get a little bump maybe? Can I get something there? God's like, man, let's think bigger than that. I can do all these. I can do more than that. And so, God is like that in our individual lives, and he's also that for the church. He's like, I can do things through the church you can't even possibly fathom if you'll let me, if you'll be open to that. And really, that's what this series is about, is what does God want to do, not just through the church in this world, but through our church, through Cornerstone, in this community and around the world, as we move into the future. And I think it's important that we have this conversation, because we're getting into a time where we're what we call post-Christian. We're post-church. This culture that we live in, it doesn't revolve itself around church and Christianity anymore. I mean, that's not something big and new to most of us here. We all get that. We see it. But the thing is, we have to change. We have to do different things to reach people. And we have to find new ways to reach out and be creative and open our hearts and minds to what God could do through us, and believe that he will do that in ways that only he can do. So we've been thinking about that a lot just here lately over the last year, and I read this book. It's called The 5 Practices of Fruitful Congregations. It's a kind of an older book that they revised and put back out, and essentially it's a book written by Robert Schnase, and I love that name, Schnase. I like to say that, Schnase. But anyway, I'll say it a few more times in a minute. But this book is just a really like basic, good core book to be reminded about what is our mission as a church, what do we do, and why do we do it, how do we do it. And so I read it, and I thought, man, this is so good for the time that we're in, visioning for the future as a church. And so our staff and our executive team have been reading it. And in the book, what they've done is they've gone out and they've identified several churches around the country that are just exceptionally fruitful. They're just doing amazing ministry wherever they are. They're healthy as a church, and they're reaching people and doing all this stuff. And so what they did is, in looking at all of these churches, they identified common factors, and there were 5 common factors that they determined among all of these churches. And then they wrote a book about it. So here are the 5 things that they came up with: radical hospitality, passionate worship, intentional faith development, risk-taking mission and service, and extravagant generosity. These were the 5 things that they identified all of these churches were doing that were helping them really genuinely reach people and build the kingdom in their community and around the world. And so I look at that list, and I think, there's something exceptional about the wording here. Like, if you take off the first words on the left there, and if you just have things like hospitality. Well, you know what? Most churches, they're hospitable. They're, okay, we're going to reach people. Worship, we worship. Churches worship. They do faith development. They find ways to help people grow in their faith. Mission and service is usually a part of most every church. Generosity, people give and are finding ways to reach out. Like, at a basic level, most churches do these 5 things. But when you put the first words on there, that's a game changer. Radical, passionate, intentional, risk-taking, extravagant. Like, when you add those words to those things, it really changes how we think about those things and how we do those things. It's taking it to another level. It is more, It is more. It is about thinking at a different level. And so when I look at these 5 practices, I'm like, you know what? I mean, I'm proud to say that we do a lot of these really well, and I'm good with that. But I never want to get comfortable in thinking, we've arrived. We've done it. Like, I always want us to be challenged as a church toward things like this. How can we even do better? All of these things that we're talking about here. And so I thought it'd be good at the beginning of this year to just dial in on who we are as a church and what we do, and maybe work through these 5 things together, because when God talks about doing immeasurably more, he's only going to do as much as we allow him to do through the practices that we have and through the ways that we act and the ways that we reach out. He's kind of looking to us to say, I want to do that, but I need you to be a part of that. And so we just want to be open to these things. So this morning I'm going to kick it off just by talking about that first one right there, radical hospitality. Like, what does that look like and what does that mean? In this book by Robert Schnase, there's this quote in here, and talking about radical hospitality. He says, Christian hospitality refers to the active desire to invite, welcome, receive, and care for those who are strangers so that they find a spiritual home and discover for themselves the unending richness of life in Christ. And I was like, well, that's a really good definition of what he's talking about here. And, just this notion that it's really going to take an active desire within us individually and then corporately as a church to want to reach people who are not in, so to speak, who are on the outside, people who are looking for God or looking for a church, or people who are new in town, or they feel like what he talks about, he describes as a stranger. I think that, that is a huge part of what's going to help us be fruitful now and in the future when we focus on people and God trying to reach them. And so when I think about the why would we want to do this to reach these people? First thing is because we've all been a stranger. Whether we know it or feel it or not, in some form or fashion, we've all been a stranger. You remember that first day at a new class or a new school when you walked in and you didn't know anybody? And you felt like a stranger. A stranger is someone who doesn't know anybody and is not known. And to walk into situations like that are kind of tough, aren't they? And so for us at times in our life, we've probably been that stranger. And to be clear, spiritually speaking, we were all strangers at some point. We were apart from God. We didn't know him. But through his prevenient grace, right, that grace that God gives us that actually helps us accept him and reach up to him and ask for help and ask for forgiveness and ask for a relationship, right? Because he gives us that grace, it allows us to then know him. And then he doesn't become a stranger to us. We are now known by him, and we are loved by him. And that's a different thing right there. We move from stranger to son and daughter of the king. Like, something different happens there. And in the Bible, in Deuteronomy, God is reminding the people of Israel that they are to be people who welcome the stranger. He says, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. He's like, don't forget, Israel. Like, you were like slaves in this foreign land, and you didn't know and weren't known, and like you were the stranger there. So understand how that feels. And so spiritually speaking, you sort of play that forward to today. Like, we still have this obligation to see people who are outside and say, you know what, I get it. What it's like to be outside of the church or outside apart from God. I get that. And I want to connect with you because I want you to know God. I don't want that to be the situation of being disconnected from him. In 1 Peter 2:10, Peter is writing actually to Gentiles, and he says, once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And, You know, at one point, Gentiles were not a part of the salvation situation. And then God said, this is not acceptable. And he reached out beyond the people of Israel and the nation of Israel and said, you know what? I want everybody in. And that's us, right? We are thankful that God wanted that to happen. He didn't want us to not be a part of this good thing that he's got going on. And so we've all been at that place. Second thing is we were all first welcomed by God, which is kind of like an extension of what I was just saying. Because it was God who first loved us, wasn't it? I mean, he's the one who first said, I want you in. He's the one who sent Jesus first before we knew him or loved him. He was the one who said, I want you to be a part of what I'm doing. And therefore, if God welcomed us in that way, if he didn't want us to be a stranger, then we too should be connecting in that same way with others. And Paul says in Romans 15, 5-7, he says, accept one another then. Why? Just as Christ accepted you in order to bring praise to God. Because God went first. That's why we would do something like this. So I guess then another question is just how? How do we be radically hospitable? And, you know, I mean, we live in the South. We're all pretty nice. We're hospitable. We got Southern hospitality going on. But I think there's something more to it. I think there's something more to really genuinely connecting with people in a different way. And I think that one of the first things that we need to do is really focus our vision. Because we can go throughout a week and we can see a lot of people. We can see a lot of circumstances or situations, but not do anything about it because we're not focused on seeing people as God sees them. And I think really that will be the difference between just seeing people and really doing something about their situation. It was said about hospitality that hospitality has us seeing people as Jesus sees them and seeing Jesus in the people that God brings before us. It's like seeing that person that God has put right in our path and saying, you know what? I see Jesus in them, and that changes things here. And you might be saying, is it really this person that I'm supposed to reach? Because sometimes it's the person we really don't want to reach. Or the person we're just like, oh my gosh, not this person. They're the hard person in my life. Yay, God says, good, this is yours, you win. And he's like, but if you'll see Jesus in them, let that change your heart about them. Let that change what you do to connect with them and see them as a person of value and worth. And Jesus himself just talks about this kind of reaching outside the norm when he tells this parable in Matthew 22. It's a parable about a king whose son is going to get married, and they're going to have a big wedding, and the king is very excited, and he's very proud that his son is going to get married, and so he sends out all these invitations to all of his friends to come to the great wedding banquet that he's going to put on in honor of his son, and wants them to come in and be a part of this special day, and they all write back to him, and these are all like big important people, and they all say, well, you know what, we'd love to come, but golly, I got to cut the grass, you know, I got to get a haircut, you know, I got to check on the cows, and you know, and they all make excuses and they decide not to come. And so the king is like, I would assume hurt by this or unhappy with this situation. And it says in Matthew 22, 8 and 9, it says, then he said to his servants, the wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. So go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone that you find. And what this parable is all about is really about the heart of God. It's about his love for everybody. It's about the fact that, you know, he looked at humanity and he said everybody needs to be a part of this banquet. I want to see everybody at the table. So how can we get them? Well, we got to see them first, don't we? Both individually as followers of Christ and then collectively as a church, how can we see people in the way that Jesus sees them in this life and in this world, every day, at work, you know, wherever we're doing. People all around us all the time. And then the second thing that goes with that is just how can we be more invitational? Because people will take a next step, but we have to kind of open that door oftentimes to make some sort of an invitation, don't we? Invite them to your house, you know, if they're in your neighborhood and they're just moved in. Hey, you want to come over? We'll cook dinner. We'll grill out in the backyard. Or can we have coffee or can we do lunch? Invite them to your group. Invite them here to church. Like, invitation goes a long way. And I get it. Sometimes that has to start with just conversation, and maybe we need to be a little more open to that too. Whenever we encounter somebody we don't know and we have an opportunity to say something, we should say it. I'm like a half introvert, half extrovert. So I can mostly talk to people, but when it comes to people I really don't know in a strange situation, I kind of sort of have to warm up to it. Anybody with me? Any introverts out there? Okay, you tracking with me? You get it? So we kind of have to get over ourselves, don't we, to be able to do that kind of thing. But You know, it's amazing how you kick the door of a conversation open, what happens. Sometimes people are just waiting for a conversation. They're just waiting for somebody to notice them. Because they need that. They need something different to happen in their life. Matthew 25:35, Jesus said, I was a stranger and you invited me in. And he's talking to people who in this life, believers, he says, look, for true believers, there will be people who will see the stranger and see me in there and they will invite me in. And Jesus was like, I'm that person. And so we should do that. And, you know, honestly, for me as a pastor, and I've been at this for like 24, 25 years, and I grew up in the church and I accepted Christ when I was 12. Like, it's been a long time since I was new to church or to Christianity or to all these kinds of things. And frankly, you know, like around here, I never feel like a stranger. I know people and stuff like that. So a few years ago, I got an opportunity to do something I don't get to do very often, which was to go to another church. And it was a fairly big church, and it was one that I had been to years and years ago, but it had changed a lot. And so I happened to be away, and I went there, and I was like, I just want to be a regular person today. I don't want to be a pastor. So I was working hard to keep my pastor hat off, and it's really hard not to evaluate everything at some other place and all this kind of stuff. So you really have to work. So I coached myself up when I got in the parking lot. I was like, all right, we're just going to be a person, just a regular person, like a regular worshiper. So I go out and I'm walking through the parking lot, and they had changed so much I wasn't sure where to go. So I just kind of followed the crowd into this particular door, and so we're going in, and it wasn't until I got in the door that I realized I am with a lot of parents and young children. And I'm like, I get in and I'm like, oh no, this is the children's area, and there's some guy looking at me like, I don't think you're supposed to be in here, brother, and you don't have kids. And so anyway, so I'm like, all right, so I go walking down the hall, and I look for the sign. I'm looking for the worship space, go up the elevator. I go to find the worship space. I'm walking through the door. There's a greeter there, and he says hello and good morning and hands me a worship thing. And I walk in, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it was big, and it was packed, and I'm standing in the back, and I'm looking, and so I'm a person who sits on the aisle if I can. You aisle people, that's us. And on an airplane, guess where I'm sitting? I'm on the aisle. Like, I love the aisle. That's where I'm going to sit. So I'm looking for the aisle seat. Well, they have one, but it's like all the way down front, like third row from the front. So that means I got to walk in front of everybody. Has anybody ever had that experience when you're new at church? You got to walk in front of everybody to go find a seat? Anybody? Anybody up here never done that? Anyway, so that's me. So I go all the way up to the front, and I sit down. I'm sitting next to people I don't know, and so we go through the worship experience, and it was great, and it was wonderful, and I never really connected with these people, and when we got done, we stood and we prayed. When I opened my eyes, they were already gone, and these people had already turned and talked to everybody, and these people were gone. All right, so I stepped on out, and I went back out, and I walked all the way through the church, and I walked right out to the parking lot and got in my car and was driving off, and I was like, man, I need to really reflect on that for just a minute. And for one thing, I didn't talk to anybody. Like, only the greeter said something to me. I did say good morning to him, but other than that, that was it. That was the whole experience. And I'm not saying anything bad about this church. They do a great job at what they do. It just so happened that I just breezed in and breezed out, and if I'd been there several weeks, it might have been a totally different experience. But it was more about this feeling, this sense of like, I was a stranger today. Like, I haven't been that in a long, long time. And it was awkward. And I didn't know things, and I didn't know anybody, and they didn't know me. And I just kind of breezed in and breezed out as the stranger. And really, my point here is that I'm so glad it was good for me, because I came back here and I thought very differently about what people have to go through when they go to church. Maybe some of you have gone through this, come into this town, maybe you're new, and you're like, man, I visited all these churches, and it's so hard because you don't know anybody, you don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to make me do something? Like, that's a big fear of people that are new. Don't make me do anything. I get it now, even more than I've ever gotten it before, It's like I totally understand. It's a tough deal, and therefore, that's why we who are in and get the deal should be way hospitable to help people overcome those fears and that uncertainty and that sense of feeling like I'm an outsider, I'm a stranger, I don't know what I'm doing here. You get what I'm saying with this? Like a little invitation goes a long way. A little like, I'm just going to overcome my fear that if I go talk to that person I've never seen before, that they're actually been here for 20 years. I'm going to overcome that, and I'm going to go say hello to them, and I'm going to say good morning, or my name is, or can I help you? I'm just going to do it. because I should. Or in whatever situation you're in, there's somebody who's standing. God has put them right in front of you. What are you going to do about it? You going to say something? You going to get out of yourself to do it? Or what are you going to do? I mean, Jesus went to a guy named Zacchaeus. He was rejected in his community. He's a tax collector. Nobody liked him. Everybody knew he was a sinner. And he went straight up to him. Zacchaeus had climbed a tree to see Jesus, and he goes, "You there, Zacchaeus, you need to get your house ready because I'm coming to your house today, and I'm going to eat dinner with you." Now, that's kind of reverse invitation because you can't invite yourself to somebody's house for dinner. But anyway, the whole point is that right in front of everybody, he said, "I'm coming to your house, and we're going to eat together." And to eat together in that culture was a big deal. And he did that with Zacchaeus. And you know what it says after that? Everybody grumbled. He went to sinner's house. Zacchaeus. Nobody liked Zacchaeus. Why is he going to his house? Jesus is trying to make a point. This is the heart of God. This is what I want to do. I want to get people who don't think they're in. I want to surprise them. I want to show them that God loves them. That's going to happen through us. We're the plan, right? We're plan A. That's how God's going to do it. Jesus understood radical hospitality. And then I think just the last thing is just this, that in order to sort of be radical in hospitality, it's to go a step further. And we were talking in sermon planning and kind of getting this all put together, and our amazing Wonder Boy youth pastor, Marcus Poppinfoos, kind of weighed in on this, and he was like, you know what, it's really like we just got to get out of our comfort zone. Like we got to take one more step than we're comfortable taking. And I was like, that's a good point, Marcus. Look at you, man. You go. And so I was like, that's right. It's going to take it's more than just, hey, good morning, how's it going? Or, hey, how was your weekend? Like, that's comfortable. Usually we can do that. That's okay. But what's beyond that? What is that thing that we do that goes, it's going to put me in sort of an uncomfortable situation, but I'm going to try it anyway? And Marcus was like, yeah, like with youth, it's really hard because you get one that comes and they're sitting by themselves and, trying to convince other youth to go and talk with them, or, college students. It's just awkward and it's hard, but it's like, that's the thing that we should be doing. We should be going and sitting down at that table next to them and saying, hey, how's it going? In fact, Marcus gave me a quote. He said, awkward together is better than awkward alone. Because Marcus is awkward and he gets awkward. No, I'm just kidding. But sure, why not? Awkward is better together than it is alone. At least we're together being awkward. We're trying, right? We're trying to do this thing because we know it's important. I think that really just taking that next step, God honors that. And he'll sort of multiply that step that we take, and he'll say, good job. I'm going to help this situation because out of your courage and out of your desire to reach somebody, something good's about to happen in their life. And that's when we begin to see immeasurably more take place. We see the kingdom breaking through us, through our church. And isn't that really what we want? And shouldn't we then be radically hospitable because lives are hinging on it? Do you agree with me on that? Yeah, I think so too.